Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation. So for all you Audie fans, he is outside sitting on the porch railing watching the neighborhood because, that's his job. For those of you who do not know, Audie is the self-appointed sheriff of our neighborhood. And he's just the boss. He sets the rules. Everybody else has to fall in line. And that's what he's doing right now. He's being sheriff. Earlier today, I was attempting to install a shower door, and Audie insisted on helping. I knew going into it that if I had to deal with the cat, that door was not going to get installed today. He sat right in front of the bathroom door, right in the hall, so that every time I stepped out of the bathroom or back into it to start doing work, I had to step over a cat. And that's fine when I was just bringing a screwdriver into the bathroom. But when I have to bring a large panel of glass over the cat, no. That was about the time when I said, I will give up for the moment. I will wait until he takes a nap, and then I'll do what I need to do. So the door installation is taking a little longer. However, in case you were wondering, it's being very diligently supervised. So I suppose it's going to be the best installed shower door ever. At least that might make this adventure a little worthwhile. So I did go out just before I started filming to ask Audie if he wanted to come in. And he did his usual. He looked at me with disdain and turned away. It's like, no, I'm ignoring you. So he's outside for the moment. If he wants to come in, he will let me know. And I will bring him in, and he will end up scolding me, probably on camera, for having left him out for too long. We're going to take a quick break for the intro, and we'll be right back. So, when we interrupted our video yesterday to sign off, because I was already over time, but as I imagine you all know, I could go over time way too easily, so my bad. I was speaking about offering other methods of saving money. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about just my favorite tips and tricks that I think are pretty universal. It's something for everyone, and most people, if this is something that appeals to them, could implement them. And now I wanted to talk about how to save money without making any changes in the types of food you are buying, but just changing where you are buying it. And I thought I would start off with the big box warehouses. Here in the U.S., it's places like Costco, BJ's, Sam's Club, stores like that, where they are offering you massive amounts of food. You go in, you can go out the door with a 50 or 100-pound bag of flour or rice. And that can save you a huge amount of money. But there's always going to be a but with this, because nothing is free in this life, as we all know. But you have to be able to store this food. You have to be able to use it in a reasonable period of time. And you have to buy the things you eat. I've done work with groups on food storage. I don't want to characterize these people as preppers, but yeah, I guess you could. In other words, emergency rations in case of floods, hurricanes, the snowstorms, whatever. I never really saw it as let's all go up into the mountains with our backpack full of food and start writing our manifesto and waiting for the world to end. More like sane, reasonable preparations coming from New England For me, when I think of emergency food, I am thinking of what happens in the blizzard when there's 6 feet of snow on the ground, it's still coming, the power is out, and that's going to be the priority, getting the power back on. Meanwhile, you don't have lights, you don't have a refrigerator, but that's okay because you don't have heat either, so everything's going to be fine. But how do you prepare for that, especially if you are requiring electricity for cooking? And by the way, here in the US, most people are, and when I say most, I'm talking about a huge percentage, because even if you use a gas range, most of them have electronic ignitions these days, and it's no longer the good old days where you just grabbed a box of matches, turned on the burner, and lit it. No, no, no. They have systems that prohibit you from doing that for safety's sake. So, yes, in some areas of the country, disaster preparedness does involve being able to safely store food. So, now that I'm through with that extensive explanation, I'm getting to my point. The one thing I always told people when we would discuss how to prepare for a disaster is store what you eat and eat what you store. That is the rule. Because it's very easy to go out and say, oh, well, tuna is in a can and it keeps forever, so I'm just going to get a case of tuna fish. What happens if your family doesn't like tuna fish? And what happens if you store the tuna, but you don't have the case of mayonnaise or motorcycle, mayonnaise or Miracle Whip to go along with it, and you don't have anything but, a can of tuna and a fork? You're not going to starve, but you're not going to be happy either. So I thought this is a good starting point. Let's take the foods we are eating and see where we can get them less expensively. If you are eating that 50-pound bag of rice, more power to you. Go to BJ's, buy it. Just make sure you're eating enough rice to go through that 50-pound bag in a reasonable period of time, because rice is very humidity sensitive. And a lot of these large bulk foods are light sensitive, humidity sensitive, temperature sensitive. And if you cannot keep them in safe conditions, you've just basically thrown your money away. Well, worse than thrown your money away. If you had thrown your money away, you would simply have no money. If you spend your money on food that goes bad before you can eat it, you not only don't have the money, but then you have to get rid of the food too. So, yeah, it's actually worse. But if you do have a large freezer, or you have the room in your kitchen, in your garage, in your wherever, basement, attic. Attic is dicey because they tend to get hot. But if you have the room to store, hey, great. If you're going to use it, need it, hey, great. But for most of us, that's not a really good plan. And I do want to let you know that freezers today tend to go through a temperature cycle. In other words, the freezer is not being held at 32 degrees or lower, 0 degrees for our centigrade friends. That's not how it works anymore. It fluctuates. It will sometimes drop a little below 32, but very often go above. And it will count on the freezer being a confined space to retain that cold longer. Doesn't always work out that way, and I know my own freezer tends to go through little mini freeze-thaw cycles all the time. That is very bad for long-term storage of frozen food, which is, in fact, one of the reasons that most of the stuff in my freezer tends to be those endless boxes of frozen spinach, because spinach is very flexible about the freeze-thaw cycle. Things like fish and seafood, they're delicate. Expensive cuts of beef, yeah, not so much. So be mindful that the big box stores are giving with one hand, but they're taking with the other. Yes, you can get fantastic prices, but you have to store large amounts of food. And it's not always going to be the food that your family really likes to eat. Just keep that in mind. Also, there's no real endless food storage out there. Unless you are going to start storing wheat. By the way, I know people who do this. Unless you're going to start storing wheat for, enough wheat to feed your family for 10 years or whatever. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there is a certain religious group out there that does require its adherents to store, I believe it's 2 years worth of food. And many of the congregants accomplish this by simply going out and buying a couple of barrels of wheat. Well, if you don't know how to grind the wheat and you don't know how to cook with the wheat once you ground it into flour, not such a good plan, just saying. So it is an option, though, for people who can do it sensibly, don't get carried away, don't say to yourself, oh, the prices are good, I think I'll buy 5 years worth of this. That's probably not a good idea. Buy the things you eat the things you buy. That's simple. But it's not the only option. Now, in one of my previous videos, I also mentioned, if your family enjoys a lot of beef or pork, you can do this with pigs as well as cows, you can buy an animal from a local farm. Now, you're not getting a live animal. It's just you have purchased one of their animals. The animal goes off to be disposed of, and there will be a butchery service in there as well. You can get great prices. You have to be able to store a lot of meat for a long period of time. And by that, I'm talking 6 months or more, depending on whether or not you have bought an entire cow or an entire hog. But you can get great prices. The biggest part of your expenditure in this is probably not going to be for the meat, but it's probably going to be for the services of a skilled butcher who will turn that deceased animal into food for you. You can do this almost anywhere in the country. Now, if you live in New York City, you're probably thinking to yourself, but I cannot. Well, you know what? You can get from New York City to my house in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania in about 2.5 hours. Seriously, that's about how long it takes. So 2.5 hours drive, you're here amid the Amish and Mennonite farmers, with people who are actually raising beef cattle, poultry for food. And so, yeah, the cost savings alone is definitely going to compensate you for the 2.5 hour drive. You can make all your arrangements online, but then you would have to come down and pick it up. So yeah, you can even do this from New York City. Most of the country is in the middle of the country. It's not on the coasts. So most people do have poultry farms, pork farms, beef farms. It's available. It's something to consider, especially if you or your family are high meat consuming people. I am not. I have, in fact, I mentioned this before, I have, in fact, purchased a portion of a cow once. I think everybody should do that at least once. It's, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. It should be on everybody's bucket list. And don't worry, I'm not jumping out of a plane with a parachute anytime soon, not if I have a choice in the matter. But for me, it was always going to the docks, buying fish off the boats or at the fish markets that cropped up right on the docks, and I could get great prices there. If this is an option for you, go for it, because you're getting what you would buy ordinarily. You're just getting better prices for it. Also, keep in mind that most areas, and I'm in the middle of nowhere now, so you're probably thinking, oh yeah, you probably have all the no-name stores. When I was in the city, we had plenty of no-name stores, little grocery stores here and there. And by that, I don't mean, mom and pop corner stores, actual grocery stores that they sold products that other grocery stores were not likely to sell, more along the lines of what you see at Aldi. And I'm throwing Aldi into this category too. These are stores that they're not in head-to-head competition with the major supermarket chains because they're not carrying the same brands. And if they did carry the same brands, they couldn't survive the competition. So my local Aldi, for example, and I do shop there, I'm in there every Monday, has a lot of interesting things, but very, very few nationally known brands. That means shopping in stores like these do have a downside. The upside, obviously, is you don't have to pay for General Mills or Green Giant marketing, because most of the products you will see are from companies that can't afford national advertising campaigns. Consequently, you don't have to pay for that. However, the off-brands can often be a mixed bag. Is it a great product? Maybe. And the only way to find out, though, is to buy it, get burned on a few things, make some great deals on other things. But Aldi is not the only store like this. They often have names like Shop and Save that sound like national chain stores, but they're not really. And they are often found in areas of the inner city where people are more likely to be walking than taking public transportation. Just throwing that out there. These are resources. And obviously, if you are buying food at any reputable grocery store, you're not taking too much of a chance. In other words, it might not be your favorite thing in the world to eat, but they're not serving up junk, and they're not serving up, like out-of-date food or anything like that. They all have to pass Board of Health standards, but you can get some good buys there. So when you see those little sort of mini grocery stores, think Aldi. Don't necessarily think, oh, this is some sort of discount place and we don't know where their food came from. Maybe it fell off the back of a truck. Wink, wink. No. Legitimate businesses. It's just that in larger cities, there's more room for all the players. Meanwhile, out in rural areas, it's often much easier for stores like this to get started because rents will be lower, overhead is lower, and people in rural areas do tend to be more inclined to bargain hunt. Most of them are farm folk. They were raised that way. So this is also an option. And as I say, I've ran into stores like that in every major city I've ever lived in. And I've lived in most of the major cities on the East Coast. So yeah, they're out there. You can get great deals. You can even find new favorite brands that you never heard of before. Additionally, you can take a look at underutilized resources like dollar stores. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, dollar store, everything is overpriced there, even if it is only $1. No. I recently did price comparison shopping on several items that one of my local dollar stores carries. May not be items that I buy. I did this for research purposes, and I found that I think it was 6 or 7 items I price checked. The dollar store had the best price on 3 of them, like far and away the best price, was competitively priced for about half the rest. There were a couple of items where the dollar store was what I would consider to be a little overpriced. I could get the same thing at Aldi's or my local grocery store. But they even, okay, I'll give you this one. Nathan's Hot Dogs, major brand, Dollar Tree, I believe it is, has a better price for Nathan's Hot Dogs than even Walmart. Like significantly below your average grocery store, but it was at least a few cents less than Walmart. So don't sell the dollar stores short. They have food sections and they price their stuff to sell. Oh, and by the way, none of this stuff was stale dated or anything like that. Dollar stores are not allowed to do that. That's all there is to it. They are governed by the same health standards as any other store that sells groceries. But I did think it was worthwhile to throw that out because I know for most people, and I put myself in this category, when I think about groceries at the dollar store, I start to think in terms of, if you want Spam or Underwood deviled ham or whatever variety of Vienna sausage, you can get that there. They've got aisles full of that stuff. And I always think of those 3 things as the average representation of dollar store groceries. Not true. Usually they have among the best prices for milk, for eggs, for cheese, anywhere. So don't turn your nose up to them. If you want to save a few pennies and you've got a dollar store nearby. Oh, and I should tell you, when I go out on Mondays, I do some grocery shopping at Target because they have better prices, believe it or not, than most of my local grocery stores. I'm serious about this, and Target can even beat out Walmart on some items. My Target, my Aldi, and my Dollar Tree are all in the same shopping plaza. So the only thing I have to do is walk a few extra steps to save some money. Now, these are just your ability to go to other places to shop. And we haven't even touched on things like farmers markets yet. Farmers markets are a mixed bag these days, and I do have to throw this out. Back in the 70s and 80s, farmers markets were kind of a fluke, and most of the people who shopped there were hippies, frankly. But as they started becoming a little more mainstream in the 80s and 90s, people started to get wise to the fact that there were good bargains to be had, as well as fresh quality produce at farmers markets. And it wasn't just a question of a farmers market set up in a park downtown. Many of these farmers markets were in buildings that ordinarily rented out as convention centers or things of that sort. Often they were older buildings that were having trouble renting out their spaces. Around here, we saw a lot of Amish and Mennonite farmers selling at markets like this. But very quickly, the prices started to match what you would pay at the regular grocery store. Plenty of people would still go there because this was good quality meat and produce, no 2 ways around that. And if you have a fondness for things like shoe fly pie is a big one around here. Baked apples, another big one. If it's something that the Amish and Mennonite farms are known for, oh yeah, it's worth it. But not everyone has a resource like that. Certainly, I am fortunate because I am in a farm area, and I'm also in an Amish/Mennonite area. So yeah, next time I have a desire for molasses pie, I know where to buy it. And the truth is, sadly, I cannot remember any time ever having had a desire for molasses pie, but I know where to get it if I need it. So there are options. For most of us, I would have to say, I think the most underutilized option would be the dollar store. You have to pick and choose what you buy. Don't go into the dollar store with your little grocery tote and say, well, I'm going to get a week's worth of groceries here, because that only works if you're willing to live on Spam and deviled ham. But if you're buying eggs and milk, yeah, take a look. If you're buying cheese, if you do happen to really like deviled ham or Spam or whatever, they can usually significantly undercut your local grocery store prices. Now, here's something if you're willing to get into other brands. For most of us, we go into the store, and if we buy something, we are buying the brands we are familiar with. We're not spending the kind of time we should in the international foods aisle. If you go to the international foods aisle, you can get things like Kedem biscuits. That is a type of cookie. They're like animal crackers, basically, only they're not shaped like animals. But that's what they taste like. They taste like animal crackers or vanilla wafers or something like that. And they sell for like $1 a package. If you took that same package, not even out of the store, but just 2 aisles over to the cookie aisle, where you're going to see Nabisco and Keebler products, you would find those products selling for 2 or 3 times as much. So don't be afraid to just experiment a little in the international aisle. You can get a lot of great things there. The Spanish aisles, well, on the East Coast, I have to say that, on the East Coast. I'm not so sure about California, but on the East Coast, where most of our Hispanic population originated in Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, you want red beans and rice? You hit the Spanish food aisle, because that's where you're going to get great rice, you're going to get great red beans, you're going to be able to buy all the seasonings you need in order to make red beans and rice. So be open to it. And by the way, I would push those Kedem biscuits on anybody. If you have kids, and you know how fast kids can go through cookies, grab one of those dollar packages, because trust me, the animal crackers are going to cost 3 times as much for the same volume of cookies, and not only are the kids not likely to even know the difference in the taste, but they might prefer the Kedem biscuits better. So that is just an overview of how to save money on the things you're already buying just by buying them somewhere else. And also, as I said, many resources that we tend to overlook. They're not coming to the front of our minds. Things like, the dollar store, or the little obscure supermarket that you've never been to because you don't know the name and you've never seen them advertised, and give it a try. It could very well be one of those little discount grocery stores that function very much the same way Aldi does. So, be open to it. All right, that is what I have for you today. Audie is still out supervising the neighborhood, but I do need to go let him in because he's no longer lying down, spreading out on that porch railing. Now he is sitting up alert, which is usually his hint that maybe he'd like to come inside. So I'm sorry we didn't get any Audie time. Maybe next time. But thank you all for being with us just the same. We're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I hope to see you next time. And for those of you who join us for Just Chatting, that's this evening, 8 o'clock New York City time. So, meanwhile, have a terrific day.